The Christmas tree stood too tall for the room, branches brushing the ceiling like arrogance. Lights blinked in perfect rhythm, rehearsed and hollow, much like our family's conversations. Beneath it, gold wrapping paper gleamed under the firelight, every bow tied with precision. Mom's voice floated through the air, too cheerful, too practiced to sound real. "Let's open gifts," she said, her eyes already turning toward my sister. Brianna squealed, her laugh sharp as crystal, tearing through ribbons and designer boxes. The sound filled the room, drowning out the quiet place where I sat. Dad handed her a handbag, caramel leather, logo shining under the lights. Her gasp echoed like music to him, pride flickering across his face. "You deserve something special," Mom said, eyes soft with adoration. Then Dad turned to me, expression dimming, hand reaching for the smallest box. "Here, Maren," he said, voice flat as the paper he used to wrap it. The box was light, careless, wrapped in leftover birthday paper, corners uneven. I peeled the tape gently, as if handling my own humiliation. Inside lay a navy beanie, the tag still attached, $12.99 printed in red ink. My smile wavered. "It's nice," I whispered, pulling the fabric through trembling fingers. "Try it on," Dad murmured, eyes already elsewhere. I slid it over my hair, the scratchy wool tugging at my scalp like apology. Brianna laughed again, showing Mom the inside of her designer bag, price tag gleaming. Their laughter filled the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to escape. I stared at the tree, searching for the ornament I made in kindergarten. A small clothespin reindeer hung near the bottom, half hidden behind a branch. It used to make Mom smile. Now it just made me ache. The room buzzed with conversation about art shows, galleries, and collectors. Brianna's name fluttered in every sentence, like a hymn sung on repeat. I waited for my turn, for someone to ask, to notice, to care. "I signed a contract," I said quietly, "to redesign the Westridge offices downtown." Mom nodded absently, her fork tapping against her plate. "That's nice, dear," she said, turning back to Brianna's story. Dad smiled at my sister, pride stretching across his face like sunlight. It hit me then, the portrait wasn't the beginning. It was proof. I was already invisible, years before that photo was taken. Every dismissal, every half-hearted smile had been a rehearsal for this. I looked at their faces, so animated when turned toward her, so distant when turned toward me. And I knew with painful clarity, love here was conditional, selective, measured. A currency I could never afford. Dinner ended with laughter, wine, and the soft chime of silverware. I excused myself early, pretending to take a call, but really I just needed air. Outside, the cold bit into my skin, sharp and cleansing. I watched the snow fall over the perfect house, lights glowing through frosted glass. Inside, they looked whole. From out here, I could finally see the cracks. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to step back in. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the radiator struggling against the cold. Bills were scattered on the counter, corners curled from weeks of handling. I poured another cup of coffee, bitter and lukewarm, watching the steam fade too quickly. The ink on my rental application, smudged as my hand, trembled slightly. A new place meant another beginning, another promise to myself to move on. My phone buzzed, unknown number flashing across the cracked screen. "Hello, this is Maren," I said, expecting spam, already tired of speaking. A woman's voice answered, polite and distant, the sound of paper and formality. "Miss Maren Ellis, this is Rebecca from the county records office." "Yes," I said slowly, "how can I help you?" "I'm calling regarding the property at 12 Bridge Street. We're updating tax records." I blinked, confused. "I don't own any property. You must have the wrong person." The woman paused, the way people do when their facts don't match reality. "According to our files, ownership transferred to you 6 years ago." My pen fell to the table, ink bleeding into the application. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I have the deed here," she continued, "signed by one Alvin Ellis." My breath caught. Grandpa. The man who taught me how to hold a hammer, how to measure twice before cutting. He'd died quietly, leaving behind a lifetime of decency. Dad told me Grandpa left no property, just a few keepsakes and tools. "Would you like to see the documents yourself?" Rebecca asked softly. "Yes," I said, though my voice sounded like someone else. 3 hours later, I sat in a windowless office, papers spread before me. Grandpa's handwriting curved gently across a notarized page, familiar and aching. "To my granddaughter Maren, I leave my home at 12 Bridge Street. She will understand its bones, its history." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk as Rebecca slid another folder toward me. "Rent records," she explained. "The property, been occupied continuously since his passing. Payments, 72 months, each check addressed to my father, Gerald Ellis. The total made my stomach twist, $172,000. And a management fee, 15%. My father had stolen my inheritance and called it business. For 6 years, while I scraped together rent, he collected mine. The betrayal pressed against my ribs, cold and deliberate. I remembered his words at the funeral, quiet and firm. He wanted the best for the family, Maren. He had looked me in the eye when he said it. I closed the folder slowly, the sound of paper final, like a door locking. Rebecca's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though I was. My pulse thudded in my ears, louder than my thoughts. Outside, the winter light burned white across the snow. Inside, something colder settled in me, the truth. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about being erased twice, once from a portrait, once from a will. And for the first time in years, I felt something fierce stir in my chest. It wasn't grief. It was resolve. The city lights blurred through the window as the bus rolled past rows of sleeping houses. My folder sat heavy on my lap, filled with proof that could shatter a family. Every page smelled like betrayal, like the dust of something long buried. At the end of the route, I stepped off into the cold night air and called her. "Attorney Hollies," I said quietly, "I think I need your help." Her voice was steady, warm in its professionalism. "Come in tomorrow, Maren. Bring everything you have." The next morning, her office smelled faintly of cedar and ink. Stacks of legal folders surrounded us, but she gave me her full attention. I laid out the documents one by one, hands trembling slightly. Deeds, rent ledgers, bank transfers signed by my father's hand. She read in silence, then looked up, her gray eyes sharp and clear. "Your grandfather left you security," she said, "and they took it." The words hit harder than I expected. I nodded, unsure whether to cry or laugh. "What can I do?" I asked. "Legally," she said, leaning forward. "Everything, but you need to decide why." I stared at the papers spread across the polished wood. This wasn't just numbers and signatures. It was years of being dismissed, forgotten, erased. "I want it back," I said finally. "All of it." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Then let's begin." The following week became a blur of photocopies and phone calls. I lived between my kitchen table and the courthouse. At night, I pinned each document to the wall, mapping the deception like a crime scene. Photos of Aspen trips, receipts for renovations, transfers labeled family fund. It was all there, blatant and cruel. Each line item was a memory twisted into proof. The night I couldn't afford textbooks. The winter I skipped heating bills to pay rent. The summer they remodeled their kitchen. The balance was exact. My loss equaled their comfort. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by memories and calculations. Sometimes I heard Grandpa's voice in my head, soft but certain. "You build things that last, Maren, even from ruins." The thought steadied me. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was rebuilding myself from what they'd stolen. When I returned to Holly's with a binder of organized chaos, she smiled. "You've done half my job already," she said. "I've done theirs for years," I replied. We spent hours drafting letters, outlining claims, filing motions. With each signature, my hand grew steadier. Power felt foreign but right, like something that had been waiting. Before leaving, she asked, "Are you ready for what comes next?" I looked out the window, where the late sun bled gold into the streets. "They took my silence for weakness," I said. "I'm ready to prove them wrong." That night, I stood by my apartment window, city lights flickering below. The reflection staring back at me didn't look small anymore. For the first time in years, I recognized her. The woman who would no longer be erased. Snow drifted across the windshield, soft and soundless, as I parked across from the house. Inside, their laughter floated through the windows, warm and hollow at once. Through the glow of the Christmas lights, they looked like a postcard version of family. I sipped from the thermos Holly's had given me, the cocoa laced with quiet courage. In the passenger seat sat the ivory envelope, sealed, heavy with consequence. I traced the edge of it, feeling the pulse of everything it represented. 6 years of silence, 6 years of stolen comfort, 6 years of pretending not to see. My phone buzzed, a message from Elaine. "You've got this. Remember who they are." I smiled faintly, the kind that carried more ache than hope. Tomorrow would not be a reunion. It would be reckoning. The next morning, the sun rose sharp against the snow, too bright to feel kind. I walked up the shoveled path, heels steady, breath even, the envelope in my hand. No knocking, I still had a key. They'd simply forgotten. The smell of cinnamon and coffee met me, just as it always had. Voices fell silent when I stepped into the dining room. Mom froze mid-sentence, her fork hovering over a plate of cinnamon rolls. Dad's hand paused around his mug. Brianna looked up, confusion already blooming. Maren," Mom stammered. "We weren't expecting you." "I figured," I said quietly, walking closer. I placed the ivory envelope in the center of the table, its thud louder than words. "Before breakfast," I said, "we should talk about what belongs to me." The ticking of the clock filled the silence, steady as a countdown. Dad's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "Proof," I answered. He reached for the envelope, fingers trembling slightly as he opened it. The color drained from his face as he read the first page. Mom leaned closer, her breath catching. Brianna glanced between them, her voice breaking. "What's going on?" "Go ahead," I said softly. "Read it all." Dad's jaw tightened. "This isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied. Mom's voice cracked. "We did it for the family, Maren, for everyone." "For everyone but me," I said. Brianna stood, eyes shining with panic. "You're destroying us over money." I laughed once, low and sharp. "No, I'm reclaiming what was never yours." Their words tangled, excuses fighting for air, but the truth drowned them all. Holly stepped through the doorway, her presence like a verdict. "The transfer takes effect immediately," she said, her tone calm and final. Dad turned pale, the paper trembling in his hands. Mom whispered something about mistakes, about forgiveness, about being family. I met her eyes. "Family doesn't erase you, Mom. You did that yourselves." She looked at me then, truly looked, as if seeing a stranger she once knew. I gathered my copies, slid them into my folder, and turned for the door. Dad's voice cracked behind me. "We're still your parents." I paused, hand on the handle, the cold seeping in from outside. "Then you should have acted like it," I said. The door closed softly behind me, sealing years of silence in that room. Outside, the snow glittered under the morning light, quiet, merciless, free. Days passed like slow rain, steady and cold, washing away what used to be familiar. The legal transfer went through quietly. No drama, no press, just a clean signature. I was now the official owner of the house they had stolen. It didn't feel like victory, only release. Word spread fast in the neighborhood. whispers carrying faster than truth. I stayed away from them, but the silence was louder than shouting. Holly's called to tell me they might contest the will. They're grasping, she said gently. They always do when control slips away. I thanked her and went back to sanding the old banister, layer by layer. Each stroke peeled away years of deceit, revealing wood that could still shine. The first renovation wasn't for profit, but for healing. The kitchen that once smelled of my grandmother's pie now smelled of sawdust. I didn't mind. Sawdust meant rebuilding. Bills piled high, but I didn't care about the money anymore. The house was alive again, breathing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Neighbors stopped by, curious, cautious. Mrs. Chambers from next door brought cookies, her hands trembling slightly. Your father raised the rent every year, she said, but never fixed the leaks. I promised her that would change. The look of relief in her eyes warmed me more than any apology could. Later, I stood in the yard where Grandpa used to garden. His tools still hung in the shed, rusted but loyal. I touched the handle of his old shovel, whispering a thank you. He had trusted me to care for this place, not to profit from it. For the first time, I understood why. Then came the letter. Cream paper, my mother's handwriting. It said we should put this unpleasantness behind us. No apology, no admission. Just a plea to pretend. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer where it stayed. Forgiveness couldn't grow in soil, still poisoned by denial. A week later, I saw her at the store. She looked smaller, wrapped in a plain coat instead of silk. Maren, she said, voice cracking. You've made your point, can't we start again? I met her eyes and saw, for the first time, the weight she carried. But it wasn't guilt. It was loss, not of money, but of me. We were never really a family, I said quietly. Just people who shared a roof. Her lips parted, searching for words that wouldn't come. I left her there, between aisles of paint colors, surrounded by choices she never made. Back home, the walls glowed a new shade of green. Light poured through the larger windows I'd installed myself. The house felt different, honest. That night, I found a hidden floorboard loose beneath the desk. Inside was an envelope, brittle with age, my name in Grandpa's handwriting. His letter was short, simple, full of faith. You build homes wherever you go, it read. You see what could be. Tears blurred the ink, until the words became one with memory. For years, I thought I'd been unwanted. Now I knew I had simply been unseen. And finally, I was done waiting to be noticed. Spring crept in quietly, soft and forgiving, like the world had decided to start over. The air smelled of rain and paint, fresh and sharp against the memory of winter. The house was almost finished, walls smooth, corners bright, the echo of life returning. Sunlight spilled through the new bay windows, wider, clearer than the old ones. Every beam of light felt like a promise my grandfather had kept for me. I spent mornings repainting, evenings sanding, nights dreaming without fear. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful, full of things I could finally hear. The tenants came to visit one by one, curious about their new landlord. Mrs. Chambers brought muffins and stories about Grandpa's stubborn kindness. He said you had his hands, she told me, steady but always building something new. I laughed softly, wiping dust from my arms, feeling that truth in my bones. We walked the garden together, where tulips pushed through dark soil. Grandpa used to say flowers bloom best where love once stood. I believed him now. The renovations spread slowly, one floor at a time, patient and deliberate. I didn't rush, healing never does. Some nights I sat on the porch, watching the lights flicker in nearby windows. They weren't reminders of what I'd lost, but symbols of what I'd chosen. The house no longer carried their voices, only mine. And it was enough. Weeks later, I invited Holly's, Elaine, and a few friends for dinner. We sat around the new oak table, laughter threading between us like gold. Di fixed the porch swing. Elaine brought wine, Holly's toasted to found family. The words stayed in the air long after the glasses were empty. We took a photo on the porch, the same spot where Grandpa once sat whittling wood. The camera clicked, capturing smiles that didn't have to be rehearsed. Later, I framed it and placed it above the fireplace. A new portrait. A real one. It didn't need perfection, just honesty. Outside, the maple tree swayed gently, its branches brushing against the roof. It had grown taller, stronger, roots deep enough to survive every storm. I watched it through the window, the rhythm of its movement matching my breath. I used to think love was something to earn, something to chase. Now I knew it was something you built, like a home, piece by piece. My family hadn't given me love. They'd given me lessons and how to recognize it when it finally came. And that somehow was enough. As dusk settled, I stepped onto the porch, the air tinged with the scent of pine. The swing creaked softly as I sat, the keys to the house warm in my palm. This place wasn't just mine by law. It was mine by right, by choice, by faith. I looked at the glowing windows, the laughter still echoing inside. For the first time, I felt the quiet certainty of belonging. Not borrowed. Not begged for. Simply earned. Simply home. The evening sky burned soft gold as the last light touched the porch rail. I sat on the swing, the one Grandpa built, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. The air carried the scent of new paint and maple leaves, fresh and forgiving. The photo above the fireplace waited inside, faces lit with unforced joy. No missing pieces, no empty spaces pretending to be love. The house behind me breathed quietly, alive again, whole again. I ran my fingers over the keys, cool metal against warm skin. They weren't just keys to a house. They were proof that I had survived. Across the yard, the maple tree swayed, branches whispering secrets to the wind. I thought of Grandpa, of his steady hands, his quiet faith in what could be. He had seen me when no one else did. He had built the foundation I now stood on. I smiled, small but real, as the first stars blinked above the roofline. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to be invited back. Because I was already home. And for the first time, that word belonged entirely to me.